Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Cornell Sustainability in the Hospitality Industry webinar, Challenges and Opportunities. My name is Aaron Adalja. I'm an assistant professor here at the Cornell School of Hotel Administration, and I will be moderating today. We have an excellent team of panelists here, which I'll introduce momentarily. I just want to first off start by thanking the Center for Hospitality Research and the eCornell and the School of Hotel Administration for sponsoring this, and welcome the audience that are near and far that are tuning in. We're hoping today to dig into some of the real nitty-gritty of what's the current state of hospitality sustainability in the hospitality industry, and what are some of the new opportunities and challenges that await us. So before I get started, I'll briefly introduce each of our panelists, and then I'll let them tell us a little bit more about themselves. First off, we have Patrick Flynn. He's the Vice President of Sustainability at Salesforce. We have Geraldine Guicciardo, who's the Global Head of Research for the Hotels and Hospitality Group and the Head of the Americas Hotel Research at JLL. We have Denise Naguib, who's the Vice President of Sustainability and Supply Diversity at Marriott. And we have Jake Shermer, who's the Senior Manager and Sustainability Specialist at Deloitte. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. We've got 1 hour, and we've got a lot of interesting questions to talk about. So I will just briefly, we'll do a round robin and have each of the panelists just speak for a minute about, reintroduce yourself and maybe just tell us a little bit about what you do in your current role. So let's start with Patrick.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron, and great to be with you all today. I lead environmental sustainability for Salesforce. Now, of course, every great environmental strategy has so much interconnection with social and economic issues. We think about it in all of its rich, interconnected complexity. We also are very much focused on climate change, the biggest, most urgent, most complex, most permanent challenge out there. And me and my team within Salesforce think about how do we use the full power of Salesforce to improve the state of the planet. Everything from our technology, our operations, what we say to our suppliers, how we help our customers, what we advocate for in public policy matters. Really thinking about all the tools that Salesforce can bring to help a planet with so much trouble and therefore so much opportunity for positive impact today.
Thank you. And let's move to Geraldine.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. As Aaron said, my name is Geraldine Guicciardo, and I am the Global Head of Research for the Hotels Division at JLL. And in that capacity, I lead the development and execution of our global research strategy. What that means is that I provide strategic insights, business development efforts, support to all the teams that fall under the hotels umbrella, but also to all of the clients that really come to JLL for hotel advice when it relates to investment. And ESG and sustainable practices are definitely top of mind right now, and something the firm as a whole is keeping a close eye on and also focusing their own business development efforts on.
Thank you. And next, Denise.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Professor Aaron, and to the Hospitality Department and Cornell for the invitation. Really excited to be here. So I lead global sustainability and supplier diversity for Marriott International. So my team, in partnership with our social impact team, both develop the strategy for the company as well as help on the execution of the programs against that overarching sustainability and social impact platform. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And lastly, but not least, Jake.
Everyone, yes, thanks so much for having me. Jake Shermer with Deloitte Consulting. So I lead our environmental sustainability measurement services, also frequently work across that measure, manage, report spectrum, if you will, with a particular focus on greenhouse gas emissions and climate. And our team works in the hospitality sector, but across other industries as well. And really, we look at sustainability as just another lens through which to view really any business issue and help drive value for our clients, whether that be through positively impacting brand and reputation, driving cost savings, helping our clients mitigate risk, what have you. And yes, I'm a Johnson MBA as well, so quick Go Big Red plug.
Great, nice, thank you. So what we're going to do today, or what I'd like to talk about today, and get your expert opinion on, is what's going on in sustainability now in the hospitality industry, and broadly speaking, in other allied industries. It's long been a topic in hospitality, sustainability, that is. And it's always been focused on a lot of operational aspects like elimination of single-use plastics, food waste, energy and water management. And obviously a lot has happened in the last 18 months. And it's, for us here on the academic side, one of the questions we are asking is what's the priority now as far as sustainability goes in the hospitality industry and broadly across other industries, compared to 18 months ago, when it really felt like we had a lot of momentum moving towards some really concrete sustainability initiatives. What's changed now? So I'll start by pitching that question to Denise, and then we'll go from there, and maybe we can get some other people to talk as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Aaron. So I think there was like an awakening that happened during the pandemic that all of a sudden kind of brought to the front of people's minds the idea that sustainability wasn't just sort of this thing over here, but really involved everything that they do. I don't know if it was a combination of too much time inside, too much time just sort of people thinking about like, I can't go anywhere far and how do I enjoy what's sort of around me. But I think the individual sort of awakening around this topic was very real during this time period. I think in addition, and maybe because of that, so many companies sort of dialed up their focus on this topic and looking at travel, obviously, and Patrick, you and I have had this conversation before, when travel went way down in 2020, as we saw, it gave people a moment to pause and think about, well, when we come back to travel, what should it look like? And how do we make sure that the travel experience sort of embeds sustainability throughout? And so absolutely, I think carbon and climate is hugely come to the forefront. Whereas before, to your point, there was a lot of focus on things like, waste and single-use plastics and things. While, carbon and water were always kind of important and underlying, I think this has really skyrocketed to the front of the line as part of decision-making and thought process around how do you travel more sustainably. So I think that's definitely changed. I think the other element of it in kind of partnership with that is how to effectively communicate these things to the traveler. So in addition to sort of doing all the work on the back end, at least from the hospitality industry, and getting the data and communicating that data to the corporates and so on, I think it's really also about how do you engage the individual traveler as they're making decisions to be able to make better decisions. So those are some of the big trends that we've seen skyrocket, candidly, over the last 6 or 8 months, even since pandemic sort of has been starting to wane.
Interesting. Geraldine, are you seeing similar things on your end as well, or do you anything different that you've observed over the last 18 months?
No, very on target with what Denise said. We're definitely seeing a shift where even institutional investors now are really paying attention to sustainability. And not as a nice thing to do, but actually building out teams and hiring resources that specialize on sustainable real estate. And one of the reasons for this is, well, our planet is signaling, right, that there's something wrong. So you have that piece, right, kind of at play. And then you have the dynamic of the consumer now also through their purchasing power affecting change, and sustainability matters to a lot of these consumers. So they're choosing what companies they purchase at, where they even choose to work based on these kind of core values, and sustainability now being one of them. And the other thing I would say is a lot of hoteliers and destinations as a whole have been thinking about sustainability and environmental kind of aspects, because as we think about how the lodging industry is recovering, and we're already seeing it in some markets, there is tremendous pent-up demand. And once, everything is fully open, what does this mean for over-tourism in certain markets? And how will hotels in these markets, right, that see over-tourism handle the overconsumption of the lodging product. And sustainability is definitely part of that conversation. And so all of those factors have really made sustainability top of mind today, I would say more so than 18 months ago.
That's really, I mean, that's really compelling. I mean, anecdotally, I would say I've observed the same thing, but it's kind of interesting to hear that you guys who are on the forefront are seeing the same thing. Jake, I wanted to ask you briefly. You obviously have your work spans beyond the hospitality industry and some of the allied industries. Are you seeing similar trends there, or is there anything different, or you might add?
No, it's similar trends without a doubt. And I think to piggyback on what my peers here said, really the institutional investors throwing their hat into the ring like never before over the last 18 months. And then also just companies across industries thinking about risk differently within coming out of COVID-19. And I think that's really spearheaded thinking about climate-related risk and the reputational aspects coming out of it, right? I mean, thinking more broadly, there's been a threefold increase in the number of net zero corporate commitments, more than 1,000 global companies setting these targets just in 2020. You have the Vanguards, BlackRocks of the world joining the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative, trying to better align investing to driving towards a low carbon future. Of course, then the changes with the current administration too, in terms of setting a science-aligned 50% reduction target by 2030 and a broader economy-wide net zero target by 2050. So there's really been a significant change, and expectations have really shifted, and they've gone from, I think, what you had introduced around, hospitality has long been in this space around driving, say, efficiency improvements in buildings. But now it's no longer enough and I'll probably bring this up a few times later, but there's kind of a need to look outside the four walls of a business, no matter what industry you're in, and try to drive positive change throughout value chains as well.
That actually leads a bit into the next question I wanted to ask. Actually, one of our audience members asked the question. I think this kind of ties into that. The question they asked was, if this has been ongoing for so long, why hasn't there been more progress made? And I think what you've all sort of hinted at here is that there has been a significant sort of more genuine commitment to sustainability over the last 18 months that really wasn't necessarily as strong prior to that. So I guess leading into my next question, one of the things I've certainly in my conversations with folks like you, I've heard in the past, is that one of the reasons environmental sustainability has been challenging to tackle is environmental impact is more challenging to measure than a traditional financial outcome. There's not necessarily easy metrics that are able to, or at least historically, there weren't standardized metrics used, and there wasn't, maybe there wasn't a bottom line impact that everyone could sort of rally around. So I guess I'll open this up to Jake. You can start, and then maybe Denise, you might want to add in. What makes environmental impact so challenging to measure? I mean, why is it? What are the challenges there? And what have you seen any progress in the past year that maybe helps that has helped bring sustainability to the forefront, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll hit on a couple of things, because there really are a number of complicating factors in here, but complexity, scoping difficulties, lack of standardization in terms of metrics and reporting expectations. I mean, there's more than 200 voluntary initiatives around reporting ESG and sustainability related data, right? And then it's just the sheer fact that so many companies have never been tasked with measuring sustainability, with measuring energy and emissions and water and waste outside of, say, tracking their normal utility bills. And I think from this kind of combined complexity standpoint, I want to touch a little bit, staying in the climate space, on greenhouse gas emissions. And just quickly on context, there's three categorizations. There's scope 1, which is things like on-site fuels, the fuel you burn in company-owned vehicles, so direct emissions. There's scope 2, which is really the electricity to keep the light bulbs on. But then there's this scope 3, which is this big, hairy bit of language for so many businesses right now, which is really everything else upstream and downstream in the value chain. So think of the emissions associated with the products and services your company purchases to keep things going. Think of logistics providers, your own employees, business travel, which of course is very front of mind here, even things like waste generated and employee commuting. And going back to the initial question, Aaron, around how have things changed in the last 18 months, I alluded to it briefly, but there's now very much an expectation that businesses drive change in scope 3, not just in scope 1 and 2. And that has absolutely turned on its head recently. And the reason for this is it's been proven that the majority of emissions do sit in the value chain. For this sector, it's more than 80% of emissions lie in scope 3, right? And at the same time, through the various outlets to report on emissions data alongside broader sustainability data, there's just so many different expectations and kind of wide-ranging accountability in terms of how to actually account for those scope 3 emissions, right? And the number of companies really doing it comprehensively today is still pretty small, as it's a pretty nascent thing. So I use greenhouse gas emissions and then scope 3 here to emphasize that broader issue that, again, it's just never really received the same attention as financial data. Many suppliers to the end customer have not been measuring or managing this stuff in the past. There's different avenues for calculating your scope 3 emissions even. And so when you add in this expectation that businesses now are really expected to influence change more broadly, it just compounds things, and this becomes quite a large task. And things are moving in the right direction, of course, and there's been some convergence on what really those expectations are and what the right standards are that need to be followed. But it's still a bit of a mess in the whole alphabet and acronym soup that I think we probably all know too well.
Yeah, I get confused myself every time I try. There's a new acronym every other day, it seems like. Denise, at Marriott, are you what's the current state there as far as trying to, or what do you see the main challenges for a hotel company like Marriott?
So before Scope 3 was cool by many, we felt like it was actually really important. And in 2012, the industry actually aligned on a methodology to calculate Scope 3 emissions for our customers. And we were really clear on understanding what the customer's needs are. There were very few customers at the time who cared or asked, but we felt like it was really important as an industry to align and do the math in the same way. It does us no good to compete by using different methodologies, but instead to compete by ensuring that our methodologies are consistent, so we're giving customers that consistent data on the back end. So we developed the Hotel Carbon Measurement Initiative and the Hotel Water Measurement Initiative to do exactly that, to provide customers their individualized carbon footprint or water footprint associated with their actual stays with us. And again, every company that was part of this, and it's a free system that you can download from the website. So we didn't want to keep it sort of closed in and only, require certain companies to be able to have access to it if they paid. The whole point was to say, no matter who you are, if you're an individual operator of a hotel, or if you're the giant chain, this is the math that you need to follow and deliver to the customer their carbon footprint. So we've been doing this a long time. I think what's changed is more and more people are receiving that information, asking some good questions about it, but also more players in the hospitality space are recognizing that this is a value add to the customer and also creating their own way to do it. And that's creating a lot of noise in the space and a lot of complexity for our customers, which is making it really hard for us, because then if we get 10 different asks from 10 different customers on the math, it makes it really difficult when we've been kind of doing this for 9+ years. I also think the other complexity in all of this is, we often talk about, and obviously a very, very important element of the sustainability space is the carbon and the emissions around Scope 3. But there are all these other things that customers really want to know about and care about, especially as they relate to their actual travel experience. So you mentioned earlier about the waste, Aaron, right? So food waste is still really important to customers. Is that a data point that they are wanting to kind of have visibility to? Maybe. Maybe not yet, but eventually, right? So we're working on similar methodology as an industry around food waste. Single-use plastics, right? There was a huge drive for that pre-pandemic, and then everything kind of went the other direction because of the pandemic. But again, like, how do we move to that next thing? So I think if we talk about it in big picture sustainability, there are so many attributes that one could sort of gather. And if we narrow it down to the sort of what's most meaningful to the traveler, every company has a different lens on what that looks like. But for us, I think at Marriott, I think the most important thing is that we're trying to be as transparent as possible, gather the most information we can at the individual hotel level, because that's really where the electric vehicle meets the plug instead of the rubber meets the road. But like that's really where that footprint matters, right? That experience for the traveler at the hotel. We can't talk about our ESG disclosures and the scores we got on CDP. That doesn't matter to the traveler. They're talking about, what do I see when I walk into my room? What experience do I have? What information do I have in my booking path to actually understand these options? What do I see on the menus, et cetera? So it's a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of like, we need to and continue to obviously focus on the disclosure and the reporting at the aggregate corporate level. And again, encompassing our managed and franchise portfolio in that. But ultimately, what we know moves the needle most is getting that granular individual property information on sustainability to the traveler, and therefore helping them make the decisions and move forward in that way.
I know Patrick has something to add here too. That's really fascinating. I mean, that getting that ground level data seems key, and it almost actually, you've almost answered the next question I was going to ask. But I want to give Patrick an opportunity. I know Salesforce is doing a lot to work with the companies that they deal with to standardize and collect information around sustainability initiatives. So Patrick, do you want to maybe, how does Salesforce kind of facilitate this type of data collection and measurement with their partners?
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. And been eager to just say +1 to pretty much everything everybody has said so far. The great awakening is happening, right? First of all, I completely agree. The planet does not know how to scream more loudly for help than it's doing right now. Record heat, fires, droughts, storms, floods, everything. The Pope, the head of the UN, the head of every business, the most famous actor and musician you can think of, like, they do not know how to speak more clearly about the need for climate action right now. Like, read what they're saying. And the science community for years and years and years has been shouting in the best way it can for immediate action right now. And it's working, all of that is the awakening we're seeing, and all of that is facilitating the broader awakening we're seeing. So there's never been a greater moment for you out there in the audience to have more impact than time spent on climate change in 2021. You're on the team, you're prepared, we need your help, there's no shortage. The measurement challenge, just reflect on how many people out there across the globe are doing financial accounting right now in your company, in your country, in your city, at your university. And now think about how many people are out there doing greenhouse gas accounting in your company, in your university, in your city. There's this incredible capacity shortfall right now for the math. And the greatest career opportunity out there is a lot along the lines of what it sounds like Jake and Deloitte are doing, a lot of what my team and Denise's team are doing inside of our companies, doing the math and figuring out how to do it in a standardized way. And so now to your question about Salesforce and what I think our unique role is, Jake talked about scope 3, and broadly, these indirect emissions can fall in terms of downstream from your company to where your customers and how the products are used, and upstream up into your supply chain, generally speaking. The interesting thing there is when you're talking downstream, you're talking about customers. And when you're talking about upstream, suppliers and supplier interaction is actually just a customer interaction in reverse. You're talking about you as the customer being very vocal and trying to push your supply chain. And so for Salesforce, the customer relationship leader in the world, there's no greater relevance than thinking about how we help all of our customers think about their own customers and how to interact with them for this climate data, and how to use their own voice with their supply chain as a customer to all of their suppliers in creating change. And so I feel an immense obligation, opportunity, responsibility for Salesforce to be there for all of our customers, to help them with this accounting problem and to help them use their voice very clearly in these customer relationships. How we do that? Couple of ways. We've got a product called Salesforce Sustainability Cloud, which is first and foremost a comprehensive single source of truth for your full scope 1, 2, 3 greenhouse gas emissions picture, coupled with the data analytics and visualization you need to take that information and take action, to know where to start and to know how to move forward. And, right now in greenhouse gas accounting, it's this paradoxical situation where we are breaking new ground day by day in terms of how well this math gets done. And at the same time, it's incredibly rudimentary. And so, we need it to mature very fast, to standardize very fast. And so part of what Salesforce is doing is also using our own influence over our customers and up to our suppliers in very clear ways to ask for this data, using Sustainability Cloud in our own operations for our own full value chain footprint, sort of as customer zero, trying to get this data exchange in the customer relationship hammered and refined and standardized, and then implementing that into the product so all of our customers can use it.
Sounds amazing. I'm excited to see how that matures over time. Geraldine, did you want to add something as well in terms of what you're seeing on or your thoughts on your end?
Yeah, more so on the challenges front. I think it's important to remember a couple unique characteristics of the hospitality industry that really have slowed the progress of sustainable efforts, right? If we think about the hotel business and the hotel real estate business, unlike other commercial real estate properties, it is a 24-hour, 365-day business, right? And so when you think about measuring, tracking, and collecting data, it only makes that process even more complex in an already kind of opaque effort, right? Which is sustainability. Hotels also have a very interesting ownership and management, right, relationship, and there's a lot of stakeholders involved. And at times, the goals and initiatives of one stakeholder may not align with those of another stakeholder, right? Where the owner may want to implement more sustainable initiatives, maybe have bulk toiletries in the bathroom or in the guest room, but that doesn't necessarily meet brand standards, right? And so where does that come into play as we move forward with the sustainability initiative in the hotel industry? There's a lot at play as well.
Yeah, I remember when I've always marveled at the ownership structure in the hospitality industry. It's something that I, before coming into my current role, I had very little appreciation for, but it's really an amazing set of contracts that exist to make the hospitality industry work. I want to switch gears a little bit, and actually I might, Geraldine, I was just going to kind of ask you, or have you stay on and ask you about a little bit about, I touched on this earlier. I was, we talk about trying to measure impact, but then, one of the other pieces we often hear is that it's hard to link sustainability measures or sustainability initiatives to a company's bottom line. And that's often been, whether or not it's as big of a problem as people say it is. We often hear that, without being able to justify this to your managers and peers in terms of a bottom line initiative, it's very hard. It used to be, at least, very hard to get everyone on board for a sustainability initiative. So I guess the question I wanted to ask, and this I can ask it to all of you, but I'll start with Geraldine. How can companies make that link, between a sustainability initiative and some sort of metric that would actually be able to convert that insight into action? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. And so I think, first of all, you need to have the right people on your team, right, that know how to measure, track, and collect the right data to then be able to interpret that data into insights, right? And you need to have someone that understands perhaps how to transform a non-sustainable property to a sustainable property, who understands the intricacies of hotel ownership, right, and can communicate clearly with each stakeholder to get that buy-in. And then what also needs to happen, so that's like at the property level, what also needs to happen is industry-wide, right, the real estate industry needs to acknowledge that there is a premium for green real estate. And so JLL is actually working on a sustainable index where, because we're behind so many transactions of commercial real estate properties, with all of this data, we'll be able to come up with an index that essentially tells you what the premium or discount is on a property value based on how green or sustainable it is. And so with initiatives like that, and also at the property level, having the right team that has already bought into the sustainability initiatives that can track and collect the right data, and also that knows what challenges may come about to prevent any cost savings from eroding is super important. Just the resources, right, at the property level, because if you think about it right now, the general managers that are running the property and the staff, to their defense, they've never been trained on how to implement sustainable initiatives. So you can't just kind of push that on them and expect them to run a successful initiative. A right partner needs to be brought in.
Interesting. Denise, I wanted to ask you, as someone who, Marriott's obviously been doing this for a long time, and they seem to have figured out how to kind of make those links. Do you have anything to add in terms of, is there additional information you think is still needed to be tracked and collected, or are you at a point, is Marriott at a point where, that link is pretty well made and strong?
I think there are a lot of really good data points that we've leveraged to be able to make the case, right? So I think the first one, in terms of speaking kind of to the language of the business, you have to understand where the revenue implications are. So for us, that has looked like we've been tracking questions and requests from our customers over the last decade around sustainability, and really being able to say, okay, which of these customers have been asking us for this information? And then the increase through time, and being able to tether that back to the revenue value to the company, right? That's when we start getting like some interest. Okay, if these customers are making decisions based on these sustainability data points, we better make sure that we're driving our hotels to meet the needs of the customers to drive these revenue points. We obviously, like I said, we compete on a lot of things as an industry, not the math, but on the other side of it. And so we want market share, and for us to get market share from our customers, we need to prove that we are better than our competitor in these areas that they're asking us about it. So I think top line revenue is a really important element to show the business the value of the work, because that's going to help owners recognize the opportunity in front of them. Back to Geraldine's comment in terms of like, they need to see that, right? They need to see that ability there. So I think the other piece of it is some of the actions that we're asking for hotels to take on, the opportunities for them, are cost reducers, right? For example, energy is generally the second highest cost to run the hotel after labor. And so if you're not realizing every opportunity to reduce that energy, and as those costs continue to go up, that's a miss on your part. It doesn't actually, at the end of the day, most of the time impact Marriott International, but it does impact the individual hotel owners or the assets that are being run, for those. So I think that's an opportunity that needs to continue to be brought forward and help make the business case, both on the top line revenue and the bottom line component. And I think the other piece is that there are a lot of data points. Again, we kind of go back to, energy and therefore carbon. there are a lot of data points that are very difficult to sort of directly tether to either a revenue generation or a cost savings. And so I think this is an ongoing space, right? How do we know if we have human rights policy in place that we, gain more revenue, for example? Or how do we know if our social volunteering efforts do move the needle on for any of our decision makers? How do we know if we're buying more responsible products that changes the behavior of a traveler to stay with us because we're serving responsible seafood? Those are very difficult to try to tether and track to individual behavior changes. And how does that kind of impact our finances at the end of the day, either for us or the owners or otherwise? And so I think there are still lots of opportunities in this space, but I think the really clear ones I think are the top line revenue and the cost savings.
Okay, yeah, that's I thought that would be the case, and I think one of the things we always one of the areas that I try to work on is trying to understand how much consumers value these types of, whether if it's an amenity or if it's something related to sustainability. Is there an actual, if you can I always say if you can translate that into an added value to the consumer and there's a willingness to pay, then you can make a strong business case for it. And it's certainly an area of research that I think is continuing to develop, particularly in hospitality.
And I would just challenge that a little bit, Erin, in that it's not always about the willingness to pay more. It's about the willingness to be able to be competitive. And sometimes that means it's at parity cost, but you're providing a better product or service. So I think the challenge is that if we're always trying to sell sustainability as a more expensive avenue for a path forward for anything, whether it's a product or service, then people just generally sort of back away from it, right? As opposed to how do we most effectively compete in a way to drive the best value holistically.
I see. That's compelling. Yeah, I understand what you mean. Okay. I'll take that note for sure. I want to switch gears once more and talk a little bit about some of the supply chain stuff that Patrick was mentioning earlier. I think one of the common threads we've heard across all four of you is that, there's a lot of linkages here, and that's one of the things that makes sustainability very challenging. There's a lot of downstream and upstream partners that are involved or affect your ability to be a sustainable company and to enact a sustainability initiative. And I want to start by asking, I'll ask this to you, Patrick. One of the things that we observe, when you think about taxes, for example, you always talk about who bears the burden of a tax. What's the incidence of the tax? But in the same sense, if we think about sustainability and companies launching sustainability initiatives, it's not unreasonable to think that in some cases, a sustainability initiative might actually end up shifting an impact upstream or downstream rather than actually positively affecting change and sustainability for a company. So I guess the first question I just wanted to ask is, how can companies sort of avoid that pitfall of essentially just kicking the can down the road versus actually making a change in sustainability? What's the key thing? What should companies be thinking about in that regard?
Yeah, interesting. And I think I see it a little differently because in these broad corporate targets that we're all setting now that include Scope 3 and underscoring the earlier points from the others, your company, your brand, your university will absolutely be judged henceforth on its full value chain impact and how it operates all the way upstream, all the way downstream. Yeah. Within this shared Scope 3 landscape where there's lack of clarity on who really bears the burden, if anything, what we've seen is companies double burdening themselves, where what we've done, and we have this term called double counting in Scope 3 in the data center industry, in the real estate industry, and it's not in the bad way of each of us trying to put it onto each other. It's actually this phenomenon where multiple companies are putting the burden of responsibility and the burden of action for these shared impacts on themselves. So it's a positive, shared, overlapping sense of responsibility, if anything, a lot of the places that I see it. Now, that needs to change. And I think there need to be clearer senses of responsibility so that every company, every entity knows how best to take action. One of the really specific things Salesforce just did was about a month ago, we notified all of our suppliers, I think probably all three of the companies represented by my shared panelists here got this, that in all future procurement contracts, climate change and climate change provisions would show up. And there are terms in this legal document called climate breach and climate remediation fee. And it requires suppliers to set science-based targets, to disclose their scope 1, 2, 3 greenhouse gas emissions, to deliver all their products and services on a carbon neutral basis or pay. And it's really, I think, a first of its kind contractual move to make climate action toothy and to show up in procurement contracts. And interestingly, the response has been nothing but incredibly positive. You might think, and sort of where your initial question was headed, Aaron, would be that there might be some pushback or some uproar, but across every conversation I've been part of, it's been extremely well received. And the way we think about it is this is a call for collaboration. We want to help. We want to use our voice very clearly and unequivocally to call for climate action upstream. And this is what the planet needs, right? At the end of the day, we need to decarbonize everything, right? The UN report from 3 years ago said to tackle this, we need rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in every aspect of society, which to me means every customer out there needs to do very clear levels of calling for action all the way up to those very hard to abate parts of the economy where we're burning things, where we're making chemicals and create change. So to me, it's this sort of chain letter effect that will actually get the job done and send a clear demand signal upstream. And now just final point is, in the hospitality industry, if I think about the guest as the customer, what a powerful role the hospitality industry has to play. Every individual out there increasingly is asking themselves, what can I do in my daily life? What can I do in my home, right? Things like shutting off the lights, turning off the faucet, less food waste, procuring from responsible sources. Like, those are all the same things that go into a responsible hospitality experience. A hotel is sort of like, your personal life professionalized by a company to deliver all of those things and meet all of those expectations at the same level that you do at home or better. And so, for the hospitality industry, understanding your most climate-oriented customer, where they're going and where they will be years from now, is so vitally important to the success of the business. And today's most climate-engaged customer is going to look like all customers over time. It's just this undoubtable megatrend.
Thank you. No, that's a good point. I think historically we used to think of environmentalists and these niche consumers, but the niche is quickly becoming the mainstream, which is really a fascinating thing to think about. I wanted to that kind of leads into my next point that I want to discuss briefly. I know we've got a little bit of time left, but this partly is symbolic, and it's partly, I'm sure it has some meaning to it as well. And I wanted to ask Jake about this. We're seeing, companies are starting to talk about sustainability as a core value. And Jake, I wanted to ask you, just kind of thinking across not just the hospitality space, but across other other space, other industries as well. What does it mean now, today, to make sustainability a core value? And does it, how does that actually affect strategic decision making? Is it a symbolic gesture, or is there actually, what do you observe in the companies that you work with? What do you observe that actually translates to in terms of tangible action at a company?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't think it's symbolic, because just that level of scrutiny is the highest it's ever been and is frankly going through the roof. So you can't really succeed and capture maximum value by having sustainability as just an add-on or something that we sort of do and sits within a communications team and that's it, right? Whatever might be the case. I mean, I was on a call with a chief strategy officer just the other week who basically said, I was reviewing my corporate growth plan, and then the next day I was reviewing my sustainability strategy, and I realized that they are the same thing. And as a sustainability professional and someone who's also very passionate about this, I've been waiting to hear this for a long time, and to hear this with more of a critical mass. And it's really happening now. And the whole integration, or you might call it mainstreaming, of sustainability is what it's about for me, right? You're not going to succeed. You can't fake it. You can't have it just being a bolt-on. And I think a lot of the conversation here has touched on climate change and GHG emissions, and I guess I started that a little bit, but it has to. It has to for anyone. But of course, sustainability is one of those rather nebulous terms that can mean different things to different people, functions, businesses, what have you. And we frequently recommend businesses start with a sustainability materiality, or think of relevancy assessment, where you're really engaging both internal stakeholders and external stakeholders to understand what matters to them. Otherwise, you can sort of feel like you need to boil the ocean and go about doing everything. And spreading yourself too thin is not a way to drive success either. And once you have that under your belt, bringing cross-functional leaders together to better understand the collective vision and ambition for sustainability for the business, and really pushing forward the strategy from there, kind of tying those two things together, right? And ensuring that you get support from the highest levels of the organization and really percolate that through. As Patrick was saying, this is a mega trend. It's undoubtable how everyone is interested in this. I mean, hopefully the word sustainability, frankly, goes away a couple of years from now, and it's just the right way of doing things. With that top-down support of the business, you're more prone to success, but you want to make sure you get the bottom level support too, because the common employee, if you will, for lack of a better way of saying it, is interested in this and has great ideas to bring to the table. And so really bringing that kind of collective ambition is what supports this. And to go back to your question more directly, it can't just be symbolic. It can't just be a bolt-on. I mean, the SEC has an ESG task force. A lot of this is voluntary right now, even though the pressures are so high, but it's going to start to be regulated too, moving forward, which is an important thing to keep in mind.
That actually, I guess the possibility of future regulation is a compelling idea. And I actually, this leads into another question I wanted to ask Geraldine. And it's, we're seeing this shift towards sustainability across the hospitality industry and also in other industries. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you see as the key driver there. Are these is this being driven by consumer preferences? Is this being driven by larger, financial institutions, or is this being driven by, the potential for government legislation? What do you think?
It's really a collection of all of those. And as we've mentioned in the past, throughout the panel, consumer driven, right? A lot of, if you think about Generation Z and their purchasing power, which is over 183 billion in the US alone, this generation really cares about sustainability and even racial and ethnic responsibilities at the corporate level. And so again, this generation, thinking about where they choose their employers or where they spend their money, this stuff matters to them. Secondly, as I alluded to earlier, institutional capital is really driving the shift as well. In the first quarter of this year alone, I want to say $183 billion of a global sustainable funds were raised, bringing the total value of global sustainable funds to $2 trillion, which is a record level. And so again, with the likes of BlackRock and others, the shift is coming, right? And they're putting the money where, their mouth is. And then lastly, government regulations, government and city regulations and incentives as well, right? There's some tax benefits for operating more green or sustainably. And so collectively, this has really made a shift. And what we mentioned earlier over the past 18 months has just accelerated this trend.
Denise, did you want to add anything from the Marriott perspective? I saw you on mute for a second.
Yeah, no, I'm all in, Geraldine. I think it's everything, right? It's the collective move in the right direction that is driving it. And who knows, chicken or egg, but I think it's coming from everywhere, right? And people, as we talked about at the beginning, this sort of the awakening or reckoning or whatever you want to call it, like people, individuals are waking up, companies are waking up, communities are waking up, the recognition of the opportunity to actually do something about it. People aren't just throwing up their hands and saying it's too late, it's, this is all going crazy. I think the recognition, especially during COVID, of that we have the power to sort of reverse some of the negative things that we've done. People seeing clear skies, fish in places that they didn't see, animals coming back to the ecosystems. All of that, I think, is starting to wake up people to the, wow, we can live in a good place and we can leverage the change that we want to see because we can make decisions and to help drive that in the right direction. The power of the wallet is real at the individual, corporate, company level, as well as, the decisions that major, countries are doing around the world. All of that helps businesses make the moves and be comfortable making the moves that we need to make because we know that the monies are either there or are following.
That actually leads pretty nicely into the next thing. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to kind of close with asking all of you to, based on what what you're seeing in your own fields and the data that you're seeing, and just I guess your opinion as a consumer yourself, as you look forward over the next 5-year horizon, particularly with regards to sustainability, what do you see as sort of the next frontier? We've talked about greenhouse gases, we've talked about Scope 3 emissions and how that is very much top of mind now and a major focus. Historically, we talked about how there was a focus on, and there still is a focus on, food waste and single-use plastics and things like that. So what's the next frontier? Once this starts to become a little more, once we've wrangled the issues around greenhouse gases in terms of sustainability initiatives, what do you think might be the next frontier of sustainability in hospitality and beyond? And I'll open it up to all of you. I guess we can just whoever wants to take it first, go for it.
I'm happy to jump in because I'm still going to stay in the greenhouse gas space, but a little bit.
Fair enough. No, that's good.
Getting a thumbs up, so I'll take it. I think maybe a little bold here, but climate central to every company's strategy and corporate purpose. And the offshoot of that, kind of playing off of the scrutiny comments we've all talked about, is measurement of that and progress is going to be tracked and regulated to some degree, and there will be significant downside risk if that is not taken. I think we're seeing a slightly worrying trend right now of measurement being suited for reporting only, but reporting is not a proxy for progress by any means, and showing real progress is going to be key to all of this.
I can jump in. I would say that a more concrete definition of what sustainability is for the industry will definitely come about. And that will then help translate these sustainable initiatives to cost saving and the bottom line, and then overall real estate value, which I think is just key here in moving the needle further and getting more people on board, more owners, more operators completely on board with sustainability as a whole.
Jump in. Yeah, I gave a thumbs up, Jake. You know, Aaron, I think there are a handful of provocative statements here, and everybody can hold me to it 5 years from now. There won't be a next beyond climate change. There's not going to be a new fad. All we're going to see is a deep appreciation of how pervasive, systemic, irreversible, and urgent it is. You know, all the audience out there will reflect on this panel where, like, they just stayed on climate change, you know, I was expecting sustainability and they just like stuck with greenhouse gases. And I think that'll be normal until we figure this out. And it's going to be a long time until we solve this thing. I also think there's going to be no bigger determinant of the success of any strategy than its alignment with climate action, whether that's a strategy for your career, whether that's a strategy for where you choose to live, your degree, the company you join, the strategy that company undertakes. Like, the biggest variable in predicting future success from here for the next 5 or 10 years is going to be aptitude and effectiveness in addressing climate action. Hold me to that one too. And then we talk about these trends of regulation and investor pressure, and they're all happening bigger and faster than my wildest hopes, even just from a few years ago. And yet, big, bold prediction is it'll be the customer pressure that'll be biggest, fastest, firmest for all companies out there. It'll be the customer pressure for better data and better performance and better accountability up and down the value chain that'll actually be felt most over the next few years, first and most for you to need to get your data in order.
All right, I'll wrap us up here with a yes and to all of that. I think the level of transparency in all that we do across everything we touch on a daily basis is going to be real. I foresee a time when our very smart smartphones will be able to tell us very clearly what our footprint is across our day, what experience and products that we consume throughout the day, what that footprint looks like, and the ability to understand it just like we understand caloric intake today will be really interesting and a way for us to actually leverage and move the needle. I think without that level of transparency, without understanding what is my footprint, what is my impact at the individual level, we're not going to get the masses involved. There's going to be a lot of great work done by the countries and companies, but I think getting the individual, the 7-8 billion people that call this planet home to be part of the solutions is where it's going to be.
It's an amazing final thought, and Patrick, those are some great bold statements, which I actually jotted a couple of those down. That was it'll be interesting to check back in with you in 5 years or 10 years and see where we're at.
Please do. I would love it. Please do.
Well, I think we are right at about time. It was really engaging discussion. I want to thank once again our panelists, Jake, Patrick, Geraldine, Denise, for taking an hour out of your day to talk with us about sustainability and the current opportunities and challenges. I hope everyone in the audience learned something. And as Jake said, we did spend a lot of time talking about greenhouse gases, and I couldn't agree more that really that is that maybe is the final frontier of environmental sustainability here, and that's just how important it is. So with that, I will just say once again, thanks to all the panelists, thanks to the audience, and to the Cornell Center for Hospitality Research for sponsoring this, and eCornell, and hope everyone has a great day, and let's keep in touch.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everyone.
Cool.